In this video, I want to show you a way to be able to pre-visualize the areas that you're actually working on. In other words, be able to see what's being affected by any particular slider or adjustment. Sometimes you just have to try things, exposure and whatnot. But sometimes you want to see what areas are being pushed to the limit or what areas are actually being affected and how to fine-tune that. And so on this image here, if we go ahead and move the slider, we can actually see interactively, the exposure being increased or decreased. But what if you want to see what areas are being pushed a little too far? These little masking previews, as I call them, allow you to pre-visualize, the areas that are being affected, or in this case, areas that may be pushed too far. To do those kind of previews, just hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on PC, and you just hold that key down and then click and drag the slider. Okay, so what this is telling me, this little preview here, is it's telling me that by pushing this far, the areas that are pushed beyond the limit, which means the white areas are going to go white, and everything else is going to get lighter, of course, but this area here went completely white and washed out. If I have my clipping point preview here and my shadow clipping, you can see those areas. Those are the ones that got pushed too far. Now, sometimes you might not need this technique for exposure. Reset that. But let's say you're adjusting the highlights, and so notice down here in this red, that's because it's clipped, meaning it's white without detail. And so if I drag this down, you can see that that actually goes away. And now we know that there is some detail in there. Now it does affect all the highlights. It's not a selective adjustment, but in this case, just by dragging it down to -4, definitely allowed me to pre-visualize the area that just to the point where it was no longer white without detail. And so, we could do the whites as well. There's smaller areas like reflections on our fingernails. Really, in this situation, it's a non-issue. But if you're doing the blacks, you can push this. Again, if we move it to the negative, we're actually seeing what's being pushed beyond any detail. Okay, so Option key and drag the slider, or on the PC, Alt drag the slider. Another tool. So in the list, on Canvas, you'll see that what tools are affected. You can try this with any tool. Some of these tools, like texture and whatnot, don't really work. This is the clipping warning, so that's really all that's doing, but it doesn't give you that little preview. The one that actually is the best, or one of the best, is the sharpening. And let me zoom in here because I want to show you how this thing looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the sharpening like crazy high. You don't want to do this to anybody, but notice that how just funky that looks. Almost looks like an etching on a dollar bill or something like that. But you have this masking slider here, and so if I hold down the Option or Alt key, and if I hold this down, the masking, because it's white, it's applying that sharpening adjustment to the entire image equally. So you can see here, on the skin, everything, even on the background a little bit, has a little bit of that sharpness to it. So what I want to do, and I'm only doing this to illustrate the masking component, is if I hold down the Option key and drag, notice how the masking value goes higher and higher, and the white areas will have the sharpening effect applied to them. The black areas won't. And that's true of any of these masking options. So if it's black and white, white will have the effect applied, black will have no effect whatsoever, and a gray value, depending on how light or dark it is, will have a certain amount of that effect applied. So here, if I push this to this point, what it's going to do is sharpen just around her eyes, around the lips, and so on. And if we zoom in here, let's zoom in a little bit more, notice in our mask, if I hold this down temporarily, the parts of her cheek and the top of her nose are black, but around her eyes and around her lips are white. That's why the effect is minimal here, but it's really strong here and around her lips and around the eyes because it's applying that effect in only those areas. Okay, so you can fine-tune that look that you're going after by using the masking so that you don't have to have it equally, applied to the whole image. Sometimes it looks better just applied to certain areas. Okay, now if I go ahead and reset that, bring it back down to some meaningful level. Let's just reset this. So to reset a lot of these tools, you hold down the Shift key and you double click on the label here. So amount, radius, and so on. And so here, if I wanted to just push this up a little bit of sharpening. The radius is just saying how far, how big of an area that you're looking at. Detail, it kind of like looks at the finer points. And then the masking, if we go in and start to, have it only do around her eyes and less around her lips, it definitely makes it a little bit better. So if we do the before and after, so here, this is before an adjustment, but you can see on the eyes, this looks a little soft and this looks a little crisper. I think it's still a little on the high side. So you can do the, before and after. Let's do the before and after left-right split. There it is. Oops. Zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. One more level of zoom here. 4:1. Gets really close. Yeah, it might be a little too tight, but you get the idea. So I think here, we've got it doesn't look that soft, but it looks a little crisper over here. Okay. What else? Okay, so that's that. I'm going to go ahead and reset this stuff so we can actually see, what's going on, and reset the exposure and contrast. Come on. All right. Doesn't want to play nice, so I'm going to type that in 0000. Cool. All right. We have the clipping warning. Turn that off. Okay. So the other one that you can use and it really will come in handy. That's too much zoom on that one. 2:1. There we go. All right. So on this one, let's go 1:1. If you want to remove any blemishes, we have the spot removal tool. And obviously we have the brush size and we click and drag and whatnot. Down at the bottom here, you can say visualize spots. So here I click on that and we get the similar looking preview. So depending on the setting on the slider here, we can make it so that we only see like the big spots, the ones that are really, really have higher contrast, like the edge of the hair to the white background. Or we can go in here and make it a little bit more pronounced, and you can see the spots that you might want to cover up. You can even do your spot removal from this point and say, let's say I want to remove this. I'm going to make the brush a little bit softer, more feather. So like this here, you don't necessarily have to know what it is. You just want to cover it up, like that one and that one. And depending on what you're working on, it might be easier to do it this way or easier to do it, with viewing the actual image. But here, all I'm doing is, grabbing these areas and blending them together. So I'm going to undo visualize spots and turn off on this. And let's zoom back out a little bit. Okay, so here if I just clear these just so you can see, that what it did. This is the before. Notice there's a few spots that are here, 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 and here. And then undoing that brings those things back, those touch-ups back, so we remove those little spots. Okay, so visualize spots at the bottom gives you that same option here. In the next video, I want to show luminance masking, kind of give you the same idea, but it gets you allows you to fine-tune some areas even more precisely just by using the brightness values in the image. Stay tuned.